The sound of splintering would echo through the night as Marcus kicked down what used to be his own front door. He stood there, breathless and confused, staring at a house he no longer recognized. What he didn't know was that his son Daniel was watching from the shadows, holding the keys to the most devastating revenge a family could ever imagine. Daniel had grown up in this Victorian manor, every corner holding pieces of his childhood. The creaking stairs where he'd sneaked down for midnight snacks, the oak tree where he'd carved his initials, the attic where he'd hidden his deepest secrets. This wasn't just property, it was his soul made of wood and stone. Everything changed when his sister Elena announced her pregnancy. Suddenly the golden child needed more space, more comfort, more everything. Their parents, Robert and Catherine, didn't even pretend to consider Daniel's feelings. "We're selling the estate to buy Elena a penthouse downtown," Catherine announced over dinner, as casually as discussing the weather. "It's just a house, son," Robert had said, not meeting Daniel's eyes. But Daniel knew better. Houses were just structures, homes were where your heart lived. And they were about to auction off his heart to the highest bidder. What his parents had forgotten was a crucial detail from Robert's gambling days. Years earlier, when debts were crushing him, Robert had quietly transferred half the property deed to Daniel to avoid creditors. A desperate move that everyone forgot, except Daniel. While Elena browsed Pinterest boards for nursery themes and Catherine called real estate agents, Daniel made his own calls. To lawyers, to banks, to a shell company he'd established under his business partner's name. Within a week, he'd sold his half of the property for 7 figures, to himself. The new buyers were a quiet couple Daniel had hired as actors. They moved in while Robert and Catherine were visiting Elena in the city, finalizing apartment purchases. When his parents returned, expecting to pack their final belongings, Robert's key no longer fit the lock. That's when Marcus, the character Robert became in his confusion, broke down his own door like a stranger in the night. The new owners called the police, reporting a break-in. Daniel watched from across the street as his father was handcuffed on the lawn he'd once mowed every Sunday. Catherine's phone call came at midnight, her voice shaking with betrayal. "How could you destroy your own family?" she whispered. Daniel's response was calm, measured. "I didn't destroy anything. I simply refused to let you destroy me." The next morning, Daniel visited his father in the holding cell. Robert's hands trembled, not from fear but from shame. "You set me up," he whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. "You left me no choice." Robert exhaled like a man watching everything crumble, not because of an enemy, but because of his own son. Elena never called, never apologized. She got her penthouse, smaller than planned, less glamorous than dreamed. She named her son Robert Jr., perhaps hoping to repair the bridge her greed had burned. But some bridges, once destroyed, can never be rebuilt. Daniel felt no satisfaction in their disappointment. His revenge wasn't about punishment, it was about reclaiming his worth. 4 years he'd been the forgotten son, the backup plan, the one who'd sacrifice for family harmony. No more. Today, Daniel lives in a minimalist loft overlooking the city skyline. Every morning, he sips coffee and remembers the house, not with bitterness but with pride. He'd learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the quietest revenge is simply refusing to be invisible. The house still stands, now genuinely owned by strangers, but what Daniel reclaimed was far more valuable than real estate. He'd taken back his power, his dignity, and his right to matter in his own family's story. Revenge doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers, and sometimes it's just the sound of a door closing with your key.